Here. Good, so we're recording. You had some good points just in terms of watching videos more than just reading. Group 2 is said the same thing, but they were a little more proliferate, a little more writers. So they talked about taking notes and interacting, and I like the fact that you like the supplemental videos. I like, that's why I put them on, for a little more deeper information, which to me is important. And sometimes you don't need to know as much, but I find that quite often you understand more if you understand the process and not just the points in the process. So yeah, and Crash Course, I wish I had the guy's budget, but so that's good. And flashcards online, Quizlet is online, which is good. Remembering things on your own body is also good. I quite often point to my own body too when I'm doing things. That's good. Now, none of you have given me specific topics that you want to cover today. So I'm not sure if it's because you're just baked and your brain can't take anything in, or you haven't really looked at the material yet. It doesn't matter why you're not ready. It's okay for you to not be very receptive today. You guys have gone through a lot, and we still have a week before the exam. So I get it. If you want now, if you don't have anything specific for me, you can get some sleep by the sounds of it. A brief overview of the endocrine system. Sure, we can do a brief overview of the endocrine system. And then we will go with online time Saturday morning and an online time Monday night. Good. And if you do have any other questions, go ahead and email me. And don't be sad if you get a quick, sloppy little email back, because I'd rather give you a quick email than think I'm ignoring you, because I know you got a lot going on. An endocrine system. You want a brief overview of the endocrine system. Okay.
Yeah, I struggled. I don't know if it was because of like other circumstances at that time and being in a practicum, but I struggled with the endocrine questions on that exam.
Like what kind of overview of everything, or just the
so which kind of, so I can get an auditory reminder. The hypothalamus only regulates the which hormones again? There's two, FSH and
no, the hypothalamus regulates the hypothalamus regulates the anterior pituitary, and there's the posterior pituitary. Just a second, let me call up the textbook so this way I have a visual to look at, so that way we've got something to focus on, and then it doesn't quite sound like me going blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because you guys are legitimately tired, and that's perfectly okay. You have gone through a lot. But it's so exciting. My little babies are almost done.
Denise, what time will you be on Saturday morning?
11:45. I'm meeting with my other class until 10:30, and then I'll need a pee break, and then 11:45. Okay.
Okay.
I will
great.
I'll send out an announcement with the links.
Okay. I just want to know, I've got a little guy that's sick tonight. How are we planning on being on a little bit longer? Because if not, I'm going to go see to him because he's not well.
You go see to him, because you know what? We're just going to do some review, so you can always watch this video later if you want.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, thank you. Good
You're
night,
welcome.
everybody.
Go tend to your little boy.
Thank you.
Endocrine system is, I don't even know, chapter 19, I think. Chapter 13. Okay. Let me just give you a global view about the endocrine system. And if there's something you want me to stop on, we'll stop on it. If I'm going too fast, feel free to slow me down, because I'm not too sure where all you're stuck. So I'm doing the brief overview, but I can slow down and veer off as needed, okay? So when we look at, first off, the endocrine system, if we look in this squishy paragraph that doesn't look exciting, but is full of all sorts of information, the endocrine system is a variety of glands and specialized cells. The glands and cells secrete hormones. So endocrine system needs hormones, and they influence every cell and organ of the body. Hormones determine, among other things, how you, whatever, blah, 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 how you sleep. Hormones need to act by only on certain cells. So although they go through the whole body, they only act on certain cells. The endocrine and the nervous system often work hand in hand, promoting communication. Then it talks and all about homeostasis. So the nervous system uses lightning fast electrical signals to communicate, making it ideal for time-sensitive processes. The endocrine system communicates through slow-acting hormones, placing it in charge of body processes that happen slowly. So electrical system, or the nervous system, is electrical, uses neurotransmitters. It's fast and it's short-lived, whereas opposed to the endocrine system uses hormones, it's slower and it's long action. Good. Then we talked, here are the main endocrine glands, but not all of them, but these are the main ones we're talking about. So there's the pineal gland, and the pineal gland that regulates the day-night cycle, and it needs darkness to produce melatonin, and melatonin is used for sleeping. Then you have the hypothalamus up at the top there, and the hypothalamus is the regulator. The thirst center is in the hypothalamus. The respiratory center is also in the hypothalamus. And it's communicating with the medulla. The hypothalamus talks to the pituitary, and we'll go into a little more detail on that later. Then you've got the thyroid gland, the parathyroids, the thymus, the adrenal glands, which are above the kidneys, the pancreas, which has both an endocrine role and something called exocrine. And the exocrine makes the digestive enzymes. The endocrine is the hormones, insulin, and glucagon. Then there's the ovaries and the testes. And in this chapter, we don't talk too much about the ovaries and the testes. We add more to that chapter we had more to that topic in 23. Okay? So you were asking about the hypothalamus. So let's go. Actually, first off, one more thing. When we look at the endocrine system, there are two categories of hormones. There is the top one here, which is the steroid hormones. The steroid hormones are lipid soluble. So like this little green dot here in the bloodstream, the little green dot is lipid soluble because it's a hormone, which is a form of lipid. And sorry, it's a steroid, which is a form of a lipid. And that little green dot can go through the cell membrane and through the nuclear membrane and acts directly on the nucleus. The second type of hormone is usually a protein-based one and sometimes called a peptide one. The protein-based one cannot go through the cell membrane. So it has to respond with something on the cell membrane, which then sets up a second messenger system. Okay, and then good example here is insulin. You can have insulin in your bloodstream, but if you don't have the proper receptors, or if the receptors aren't activating that second messenger, which opens the glucose receptors, it doesn't work properly. So often the protein-based hormones are a little more trickier to work because there's more steps. Anytime there's more steps, it's trickier. Okay, you were asking about the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus, it doesn't say much. The hypothalamus is below the thalamus, and the hypothalamus will act on the anterior and posterior pituitary. And the anterior pituitary, when it's developing in the fetus, it comes from glandular tissue. The posterior pituitary comes from nervous tissue, so it has a nervous connection. Let's start with the simpler one first, which is the posterior pituitary. Am I going too fast? Or are you getting this? We're good? One minute. Okay. Sure, I'll stop for 1 minute and then I will find the image that I want to get to first. So I'll stop talking for a bit. There we go. Ready to go again? That's fine, Michaela. You can watch the rest of the recording tomorrow and send me any questions if you want anything specifically covered on Saturday or Monday. Good night. Okay, Angela, and anyone else who wants to listen to this review. The posterior pituitary is neural tissue. So you've got your neuron at the top, your nerve fibers, and they will send the stimulus through the nerve fibers down to the posterior pituitary, which then stimulates the nervous system to release them. So you have in the anterior, you have releasing hormones. In the posterior, you just have the neurons being synthesized. The neurons synthesize the hormone, and then so there's not that second stimulating step. The posterior pituitary, the hormones we're going to pay attention to in the posterior pituitary are oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. Oxytocin is the birthing hormone. It stimulates the contraction of the uterus, triggers the release of milk and lactation. And then the anterior or antidiuretic hormone is the one that acts on the kidneys. And we talked more about that when we talked about the kidneys, how antidiuretic hormone will influence the aquaporins, and it'll create more aquaporins which absorb more water. Okay? So when we're talking about the posterior pituitary, neural control, and oxytocin, antidiuretic hormone. Those are the two there. Okay. Any questions on the posterior before I go to the anterior? Okay. I think I'm pretty visual. So the visual one that helps me keep this organized is this image here. Oh, first off, let's talk about the interaction between the anterior and the hypothalamus. So in this situation, instead of having the yellow nervy things going to the posterior pituitary, you've got a capillary bed. So the hypothalamus will deliver a whole set of hormones that either have releasing or inhibiting in it. They're releasing hormones such as the one we talked about a lot was gonadotrophin releasing hormone, thyroid releasing hormone, but they have the word releasing in it. So I didn't focus them on them too much because that will just be more words that you memorize and forget. Good. Once the anterior pituitary is stimulated by the hypothalamus, this is the one, this diagram is a good one to show sort of an overview of what's going on. The anterior pituitary releases thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid. Then the thyroid itself releases T3 and T4, which affect metabolism. Then you have prolactin coming from the anterior pituitary. Prolactin, pro means before, lactin means milk. So prolactin stimulates milk production in the female. Then you've got adrenal corticotropic hormone in the bottom left corner of the screen. It stimulates the adrenal cortex to secrete. So if you look at the AC in ACTH, adrenal corticotropic hormone. So it will stimulate the adrenal glands, which we'll talk about later on in terms of what all that happens with the adrenal glands. Okay, we're going to go top to the next side now, the right side of the page. You've got growth hormone. And if you think of what do you do when you grow, you metabolize carbohydrates and you increase your bone and skeletal mass. So growth hormone increases your carbohydrate metabolism. And with protein synthesis, that will increase your skeletal mass and your bone mass. Then you have your two sex hormones, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone stimulates the gonads, and in the sperm or in the testes will produce sperm, and in the egg will produce, the ovary, it'll produce an egg. Then luteinizing hormone, the other sex hormones, in female produces ovulation, and in males it produces testosterone. That is a lot of information, but these summary tables are pretty good here. The thing that I find really confusing about the hormone system is you have a gland which releases a hormone which stimulates a gland to release another hormone which will often feed back onto the first gland. So there's lots of loops. And after a while, everything sounds confusing until you sit down and figure it out. Okay. Anything more specific you want on this before I go to the other layers of the hormones? You want me to go back to the anterior posterior pituitary or posterior pituitary two hormones? What are they? The anterior produces 6. You're good, you're good. Okay. Let's look at the adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla is, medulla, it basically means middle, and cortex means outside. So the adrenal medulla is the middle of the adrenal glands. So this one is, it produces catecholamines, which is epinephrine and norepinephrine. That's pretty much all you need to realize. And that will, well, that's good enough. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are sympathetic nervous system hormones. When you look at the cortex, the adrenal cortex produces hormones that have corta in it. So if you look at this table, it's a mineral corticoid, which is aldosterone. The next column says glucocorticoids, which is cortisol. And then there's the sex hormones, androgen. Okay, and again, another layer. And that's what's so confusing about endocrine, is there's so many layers. Okay. So adrenal medulla produces sympathetic nervous system hormones, norepinephrine and epinephrine. And the cortex produces mineralocorticoids, aldosterone, glucocorticoids, cortisol, and sex hormones, androgens. Sadly, it's just a lot of words you need to drill into your brain. And there are some good summaries here. What does aldosterone do? We learned in the kidney and the kidney unit that aldosterone will help pump sodium. You pump sodium, water moves, and you've retained water. Cortisol will stimulate fat breakdown and convert fat and protein to glucose. It's also anti-inflammatory. Adrenal androgens will they come from this, they will target the sex organs, and they will produce androgynous effects, so pubic hair, axillary hair. And then you have the estrogens. Okay. Good. A little bit here about how stress affects the hypothalamus, affects the pituitary, which affects the adrenals by releasing cortisol, and then cortisol will loop back and affect everything else. Okay, need a break, or can I keep going on? Any question before I keep going on? You don't need to know which ones are steroids and which ones are peptides, but the steroids are the sex hormones, or the androgen, testosterone, estrogen are the sort of three examples that you need to know. You don't need to go into too much detail. Okay, ready to go on? Next is the thymus gland. The thymus gland we talked about the thymus gland when we talked about when we talked about T cells, and because that's the T in lymphocyte T cells, and they basically secrete thymosin and thymopoietin. And notice how it's got the word thymo in it, so you can put that thymo something comes from the thymus gland. Thyroid. The thyroid is very glandular, and it's one of the few glands that can actually store its hormone. And it produces triiodothyroxine, which is T3, and it's in that purple box, and T4, which is thyroxine. Then between these follicles is a parafollicle cell, which produces calcitonin. And calcitonin will put stuff back into the brains and body. And that's the thyroid gland. Calcitonin, calcitonin puts calcium from the blood back into the body, especially bones. Now, calcitonin works opposite of parathyroid hormones. Parathyroid hormone comes from the parathyroid glands, which are little glands inside the thyroid gland. And parathyroid hormone will take the blood, will take calcium out of the bones and the digestive system and put it into the blood, which then puts it back into the bones. The difference between urine components and water regulation. You need a little more detail, Damaris. Urine components means like the fact that you should have nitrogenous waste in your urine, and regulation of water has to do with aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone. The components of your urine are getting rid of wastes in the blood, such as urea, uric acid, and ammonia, and any other excess drugs that your body doesn't need. You can also compensate in your urine bicarbonate to help regulate the pH. Water regulation is done to keep the level of your blood volume correctly. So you regulate your water, or you regulate the water in the blood, and then anything left over goes into the urine. And water regulation is done by aldosterone. And aldosterone is the great big loop. So aldosterone starts with the juxtaglomerular apparatus, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone loop, and then the aldosterone will increase the amount of sodium pumped, and when you move sodium, water follows. And then antidiuretic hormone is released from the posterior pituitary. It acts on the collecting tubes and the proximal convoluted tubule to add more aquaporins. More aquaporins increases the amount of water absorbed. If you absorb water, you pee less. Good. Okay. Are you ready to go on with the pancreas hormones? The exam is based around the study guides we had. Any information on the study guide is fair game, but I'm trying to answer, like I'm trying to, you know how sometimes teachers like to put that really one obscure thing on? I'm trying to make it not obscure. It's different questions than on the exam, on the unit tests, but I mean, they're similar. instead of, like, an example is with the ECG, instead of asking you what the P wave is, I could ask you about the T wave, something like that. Okay, ready to go over the hormones from the pancreas. Okay, with the hormones from the pancreas, first off, you have the digestive process of the pancreas. So when you look at the pancreas itself, you have two different types of cells. You've got these purple and blue ones, which are endocrine, because they have hormones related to it. And then there's the yellow ones with the tube-like structure around them. Those tube-like ones are secretors, and they will secrete the digestive enzymes which go into those opening ducts, which then go into the digestive tract. And those are your pancreatic juices, your lipases, your bicarbonate, your trypsinogen, I'm missing one, amylases. When you look at the islets of Langerhans, which is the pancreatic islets, there are three cells. Alpha secrete glucagon, beta secrete insulin, and delta secretes somatostatin, which we don't talk about much, so don't worry about that one in too much detail. Then, when you look at the regulation of blood glucose, after eating, the blood glucose level will rise. That will be detected by the beta cells, and the beta cells will secrete insulin. Insulin will then go into the blood and will act on the liver, causing glucose to be put into its storage compound, glycogen. And glucose also goes into fat cells, and it also goes into muscle cells. When your blood sugar drops because you haven't eaten, the blood sugar will drop to a point, and that's when the alpha cells will do their triggering, and they will release glucagon. Glucagon is a hormone that will then go into the blood, and it will act on the liver, breaking down the glycogen of the liver back into simple sugars. And that is the endocrine of the pancreas. How many short answers? Let me see. One, two, I've got 5 right now. 3 of them have option in it. I might take out one of them, and one of them is a bonus mark. And it's not a big essay for the short answers. It's more like a couple of sentence compare and contrast stuff. Okay. The role of buffers in acid and base and acid. Okay. They act the same, but they're in a different location. So the kidney, one of the acid-base buffers involves bicarbonate. The kidney will remove bicarbonate or keep bicarbonate in the blood to act as an efficient buffer. Does that make sense? Or do you want, let me pull up the page and that'll make a little more sense to you. It's very tricky. So in the last part of, so first off, when we talk about a buffer is a weak acid and a weak base going back and forth. And one of those weak acids, there's 3 in the system. One of them is bicarbonate. Right here. So if you look at this last line, the purple thing at the end is called hydrogen bicarbonate. That bicarbonate can be removed or kept by the kidney. So that is how the kidney can help with acid-base balance, by getting rid of it or putting it there. So here is a buffer, and you've got, it's a buffer because you've got your weak acid and your weak base. And if you breathe a lot, you will pull it towards the carbon dioxide end, and you will pull out the carbon dioxide, and you will increase the pH so it's less acidic. If you look at the kidneys, so this is very confusing, but not overly. If you look on the right side, there is the purple blob down in the very bottom cell. Let's go to the second last one. The second last cell, you've got the purple blob. What will happen with the kidney here is that if there is, the body needs to get rid of hydrogen, it will secrete the hydrogen and keep the bicarbonate. Then the bicarbonate reacts with the sodium and it goes back into your blood. So this is a way of getting rid of hydrogen, which is the acid part of it, and keeping the bicarbonate, which is the base buffer part of it. Did that help you, or did that just confuse you more?
Let me paraphrase to see if I got it. So the kidneys will be just in charge of either remove or keep the bicarbonate. And the
Yes.
buffer will just kind of transform it.
Well, the kidneys act as a source to create the buffer. Because what a buffer is a reaction that has a weak base and a weak acid in it, and bicarbonate is a weak base.
Mm-hmm. So then what, yes, I'm still confused. So what will be then the difference between what is the buffer and what does the kidney do when we are talking
Okay.
about?
In the blood, there are 3 buffers.
Yeah.
One is this bicarbonate buffer. The other one is a phosphate buffer. And the third one is a protein buffer. So that is the role of 3 different buffers. The kidney has a role of acid-base balance, helping with the bicarbonate buffer.
Okay, so the kidney will only interfere with the one buffer, the bicarbonate buffer, and then
It doesn't interfere with it, it helps it.
I mean, okay, help.
Yeah.
And then the buffers themselves, they just work with keeping the balance of pH in the blood.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
The third buffer is a protein buffer. The large proteins in your blood have some areas that hydrogen ion will hydrogen bond to it, and so that will take the hydrogens out of the system. What you're asking for is right here somewhere. Yeah, right here. If you see where it says chemical buffers, then you go to the second line and it says system, phosphate buffer, and protein buffer. If the thing about a buffer is if it needs to correct the acid, it will become more basic. If it needs to take it more basic, it will become more acid. So a buffer is a system that can go either way to help balance it out. Just understand that there are 3 chemical buffers, and we go into detail with the bicarbonate buffer because carbon dioxide is a way of also helping to control the components of this buffer. And this is why the lungs are seen as a quick way to balance the blood pH, and the kidneys are seen as a long-term way to balance the blood pH. And if you have problems with breathing, your kidneys can compensate. And if you have a problem with your kidneys, often your breathing compensates. Sperm from formation to ejaculation. Sure thing. Okay. This is a diagram to help you talk about that. Because of the influence of follicle stimulating hormone, that will stimulate the seminiferous tubules, or to be more specific, the lining of the seminiferous tubules called germ cells. And they will, there's a lot of detail onto what actually happens, but you just need to realize that they will cause the sperm cells to grow. And the sperm cells, let me find the sperm cells inside. Here we go. So the sperm cells go through a lot of phases. I just want you to generally understand the phases. Excuse me. You don't need to know all the terminology here. Just understand that in the germ cell layer, the cells will divide by meiosis. Good. Part number 4 there. Through meiosis, the primary spermatocyte yields 2 genetically unique secondary spermatocytes with 32 chromosomes. So what I want you to realize is through the process of meiosis, you get half the genetic material of the sperm cell or of the regular cell. And then it forms a head on the end or a tail on the end. And this happens in the seminiferous tubules. So when they're made, they will start in the seminiferous tubules. Then, so in this peach colored box, second from the bottom, or on the bottom on the right, left, it says that the seminiferous tubules are the tiny tubules where sperm is produced. Then the sperm will go and collect in part number, oh, it can't see it. The part number 3, the epididymis. The sperm passes into the epididymis, and the sperm basically are stored there and until ejaculation occurs. Okay, so they're created in the seminiferous tubules, stored in the epididymis. Then, when during sexual arousal, the contractions of the muscles will force the sperm out of the epididymis through what is called number 4, the vas deferens. Then it will leave the penis, go and join the purple box on the side, or sorry, the boxes on the right side. It will, as the sperm goes past the seminiferous vesicles, the seminal vesicles will add fluid, which is the semen, and that adds sugar for fructose for energy, and also lubrication and something to help the acidity of the uterus. Then the prostate gland, which is the purple box, will add the alkaline fluid, and the alkaline fluid helps to combat the acidity in the uterus. And that will also help with mobility. Then the third gland is the bulbourethral gland, and the bulbourethral gland helps to neutralize the acidity, and also one of these adds mucus or lubricant to help it flow better. Then it comes out through the urethra. And the urethra, so this is the urethra is, it looks kind of like a mouth here, the way this is cut, but it is a tube in the penis. Because of stimulation to the penis, blood will flow into the blue part, which is called the corpus cavernosa, and the purple part around the urethra called the corpus spongiosum. And as blood flows into those two areas, it will cause the penis to be hard, and that will also help with the contractions of the body, will help to cause the fluid to come out of the body, and that's called an erection. Okay? Do you need to memorize the parts of the diagram? Yes, there is a diagram of both the boys and the girls on the final exam. So this one's important. And the female is important. This one, oops, that one, and you need to know Fimbriae, and Fimbriae is not on that one. Oh, it is on that one. No, it's not on that one. And those are good matching questions, right? So I give you the words, but you just have to match them up. So spelling doesn't matter. Good. Any more questions? These are some good questions. Will there be a lot of matching? Not a lot, but matching is a good way to test basic vocabulary. I don't know exactly how many matching questions, but there are some. I don't know exactly how many. 1, 2, 3, 4. At least 4. How's that for? Matching is a good way to take care of labeling. Yeah, you only need to raise one of the digestive system's pretty straightforward. So the digestive one we're looking at is I use the diagrams that are not, like I don't use the exact diagram from the textbook because then you memorize the location of the lines and not the diagram. You may want to pay attention to a diagram that looks like this. You need to generally know what the teeth are, but I won't ask you what specific teeth are. So know the general function of teeth and that they're alive and have nerves and enamel on them and are used for grinding or mechanical digestion. I won't ask you all the names of the teeth. That's a little too detailed. What about the cells in the gastric pit? You need to know it's not a labeling, it's what do they do than what the pit is. So this is the diagram you're talking about. I'm more concerned about the fact that it is the stomach and what each of the cells secrete and what the secretion does. That's more meaningful to me than name that part. Good. The layers of the digestive system only need to know 3 layers, or we'll be more specific on the stomach wall. If we get more specific on the stomach wall, it's the same thing. You just add an oblique layer to it. Do you need to know the amino acids? No, you just need to know that amino acids make up proteins. Any more questions for you or from you? Good. Acetylcholine in the Krebs cycle. You don't need to, you mean acetyl-CoA in the Krebs cycle. You don't need to know about, do you need to know about? I'm not sure what you're asking, because I wouldn't even put them together. Acetylcholine isn't in the Krebs cycle. Acetyl-CoA is in the Krebs cycle, not acetylcholine.
Yeah, I was having a brain fart.
It's okay. They sound the same. So it's acetyl-CoA, and acetyl-CoA is an enzyme that is it's a two carbon molecule that joins the 4-carbon molecule to go into the, don't even worry about that. It's a 2-carbon molecule that joins the 4-carbon, no, it joins acetyl-CoA. Okay. Acetyl-CoA, you take a glucose, you activate it, you break it apart, you take off a carbon, and then you have your 2-carbon acetyl-CoA. The acetyl-CoA goes into the Krebs cycle to make ATP. That's how that works. It has nothing to do with, acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter, not related. They just sound the same, so it's one of those things to get confused on. And you don't have to worry about acetyl-CoA. That's detail that we didn't cover in this class. Yes, you need to know the difference between aerobic, which is with oxygen, and anaerobic, which is without oxygen. Aerobic respiration breaks down everything to carbon dioxide and water and gives you a large amount of energy. where anaerobic in humans will produce lactic acid, and lactic acid is an incomplete breakdown. Sorry, someone's just at my door. It's an incomplete breakdown of glucose, and it will cause acid buildup and muscle fatigue in the muscle. But when you finish exercising and keep breathing and repay that oxygen debt, that lactic acid can go back to what's called pyruvate, and then the pyruvate can go into the Krebs cycle. Exactly.
I am exhausted.
Okay, how are we doing? Any more questions? Hi, Bobby. We good? There's 4 or 5 of you left, 6 of you left. You've got my attention here if you want it. The main vitamins you need to know, do you need to know any vitamins? No, you don't need. I think we talk about vitamin K used in blood clotting and coming from the large intestine, but that's it. Let me double check. You need to realize that vitamins are usually coenzymes and they are organic. That's about it. No. Do the past units have diagrams? Maybe. I don't think so. They're not labeled the diagram quite as much. No. I don't remember. No, let's say no for diagrams.